Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you all for coming today to this very important panel. Good to see people. I always like a room that's a standing room. There are some seats for people at the back if you want to come in. Okay, so agenda for today. We're going to talk, and then we're going to try and bring some of you in. Obviously, time is tight. And we are going to have as much of an important conversation as possible. My name is Mehdi Hasan. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of a new media company called Zeteo, which I founded earlier this year after I left MSNBC. Great. You know what Barack Obama always says, don't clap, vote. I said, don't clap, subscribe, right? Zeteo.com, Zeteo.com. Shameless plug out of the way, but join us for some independent media. Look, one of the reasons I set up Zeteo is because I wanted to focus on the fascist threat at home and the genocidal threat abroad. And we've done a lot of coverage of the fascist threat at home and the genocidal threat abroad. The thing is, when it comes to Gaza, as the Congresswoman just laid out, there are no words that can do justice to what has happened over the last 11 months. The best writers in the world cannot do justice to what we have seen with our own eyes over the last year. It is difficult to sit in the United States of America knowing that as we speak right now, people are being killed in Gaza. Children are having limbs amputated in Gaza. Women are having C-sections without anesthetic in Gaza. People are being literally starved to death in 2024 by a US armed and enabled and funded military in Gaza. Right? That is what is happening right now. Let's just not beat around the bush. And it's not just a moral disaster. The reason we're here today is it's also a political disaster. It's a disaster for a lot of people in this room who care about the future of the Democratic Party, the future of small d democratic values in this country. And what annoys me most, and why I'm so happy to be here today and why I had to accept the Congresswoman's invite to moderate this, is I'm tired of the debate that this issue is about Muslim Americans and Arab Americans in Dearborn, Michigan. That is a very narrow and very lazy view. In January of this year, 10 long months ago, 200 black pastors in the crucial swing state of Georgia wrote an open letter calling for a ceasefire. 1,000 black pastors nationwide said, please, Joe Biden, we like you. We want to vote for you, but what do we tell our congregants? Right? This is an issue that affects black people, brown people, young people, progressives, anyone with a heart cares about this issue. So when people say, you know, the only word more unpopular than DEI right now is intersectionality. This is an intersectional struggle, and that is why we're here today. If you want to understand why it's an intersectional struggle, that's what you're going to hear from our wonderful panel today. I'm supposed to do lots of introductions. Congresswomen Rashida, Tlaib, and Cori Bush do not need introductions in this room. They are two of the most... They are... Given we are short on time, that applause counts as the introduction. Ruwa Romman is a lawmaker from Georgia, a Democrat. She is the first ever Muslim woman elected to the state house in Georgia, the first Palestinian American elected to any elected office in Georgia. And the woman who the DNC were dumb enough to keep off stage in prime time in Chicago a few weeks ago. Our last panelist is not here yet, but he will be here soon. Dr. Marc Lamont Hill, author, academic, activist. I'm jealous of him because he presents my old show on Al Jazeera English called Up Front. He also has a great YouTube channel that I urge you all to check out. And when he comes, you need to tell him that I gave him a great intro. All right, let's get going. I'm going to start with Representative Romman. You represent part of Atlanta, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, parts of your district, the suburbs. You've grown up, you've organized around, you've been elected to areas with a lot of white Americans, black Americans, brown Americans. What have you learned about that experience that you bring to the Gaza experience?
Yeah, so thank you. I'm honored, truly honored and humbled to be here. I feel like I shouldn't be, if you can't tell how awkward I feel right now. But you know, I represent West Gwinnett, which is actually a little bit north of Atlanta. It is, yeah, I mean, truly, it is where the road to winning in Georgia runs. Period, end of story. It's one of the most diverse counties in the state. It is massive. It's one of the largest counties in the state. And where I specifically represent is almost sort of one of the last places where it's not more diverse than it is not diverse, you know? So it's kind of still on the cusp. And I didn't intend to run for office, but the experiences that I've had and the way that this has moved is just hard to articulate. So let me just focus on this point. What I tell people all the time is that we need to be acting locally while thinking globally. And my experience as a state representative absolutely shaped everything I've been doing over the past 2 years, even well before, what's been happening in Gaza. Because the reality is that even when I was running for office, me being a Palestinian was so offensive to the GOP that, my incredibly terrible opponent at the time, of all the things he could have talked about, whether it was himself, his policies, whatever, kept talking about how I'm, a terrorist or a terrorist sympathizer or whatever the case may be. And when I got to the State House, I thought, you know what? At least I don't have to deal with everything happening in Palestine, because I just lost my grandfather. And I was like, it's state, I'll be okay, I'll deal, it's fine. Little did I know that even in our own state legislature, we were seeing bills that would frankly criminalize legitimate criticism of the state of Israel. And it was set under the legitimate need to stop the rising tide of anti-Semitism in Georgia. And it was real, you guys. Like, there were people standing outside synagogues with Nazi flags the day before a bunch of Jewish kids were supposed to start summer school. It was real. The problem was nothing in that bill that, by the way, passed this year and was shoved through this year by a Republican-controlled legislature and signed by a Republican governor. Nothing in that bill would have stopped any of that. And I found myself in this weird crux of, like, we've got local legislation to worry about, and it had these sort of national and international implications. And we barely get staff. I wasn't equipped. But the beauty of that, and what sustained me, even in the past 11 months, was this beautiful multi-faith, multi-racial, multi-generational coalition that at the Capitol in Georgia came and said, you're not doing this in our name. And we all oppose this, right? And then that same coalition stepped up in October, and I'll be honest with you, is the reason I frankly have been able to survive the past 11 months. Because they have carried me at times when I couldn't carry myself, and it continues to remind me and ground me that none of us can do any of this alone. And if there's anything I've learned in the despair and the destruction and the horror and the feeling of rejection and dejection and you name it, it's the fact that the only way we move forward is together. And no matter how long it takes for national level people to get it through their heads, we cannot win in a country that continues to see the rising tide of white supremacy without centering the people who have faced it head on. And that includes all of us.
Thank you. Congresswoman Tlaib, you have Detroit, Dearborn, Michigan. It's your backyard. You have been a voice on this issue for a long time as an activist, as an organizer, as a member of Congress, and as a Palestinian American woman. Respond to that line that I mentioned earlier, that you're just a person in Congress who cares about this stuff because you're a Palestinian American. No one else cares.
God, you sound just like them. It's so amazing. I was talking about this today, Cori, where in our breakfast for the Michigan delegation, and I said, I always see Cori, but she gets up and she says, "St. Louis and I rise," or St. Louis, your congresswoman loves you. I always get up and I said, "I'm Rashida Tlaib, and I come from the most beautiful, blackest city in the country." And every time. And Mehdi, I don't think people realize what that really means, because even as a Palestinian girl, I started school, I didn't speak English, and I remember my mother going to a parent meeting, but it was one of those parent meetings where, and I know y'all too young to know what Farmer Jack is, but they were giving out the little, kind of like a gift card, but it was a paper gift card back then. They didn't have it that's looking like a credit card like it does today. And I remember my mom was going to this parent meeting, and, they were rolling around the room and they were introducing themselves, and it got to my mother, and my mother's like whispery. And it was always the black mothers in the room who were like, "Fatima, we can't hear you. Raise your voice." And I always say that just in that moment, I don't think they realize this. I'm in like first grade, and I'm watching black women raise the voice of this Palestinian woman who grew up thinking, just don't breathe, be invisible, I'll live. Checkpoint up, don't breathe, don't say anything, don't do eye contact, I'll live. And as you grow up and you start, listening to the stories of, again, this is an 85% black city, my teachers, the neighbors, anybody that comes up to you has an experience. When I started talking about what was going on with my family, I remember my driver's ed teacher saying, oh no, they used to have the fire department come in and hose down people at protests. And I was like, oh really? They do skunk water. And it's just like these stories that you share in this connectivity that happens. But one of the things after I got elected to even state house and Congress, I started working on water. Water is life. Water is a human right. And organically, Cori, organically, Mehdi, you should have seen, I was talking about how cutting off water is violence, right? And all of a sudden, they're like, yeah, just like in Gaza. I was like, you're right. And even though I was coming from the lens of being a Detroiter, and as somebody that we had to beg the United Nations to come to Detroit because literally seniors in their 70s were putting snow in a bucket to melt the snow to turn to water so they can flush their toilet because they didn't get access to water. And so we started saying in my office, you're right. From Detroit to Gaza, water is a human right. So cutting off water. It was beautifully organic, Mehdi. So my lived experience as being a Palestinian, but also as a Muslima, child of immigrants, all that, in a beautiful Black city, it was just beautifully connecting on its own without me even pushing or trying. And I think that people don't even get it. Like, sometimes I come from a lens of really being a Detroiter when I fight for Palestine. Because I'm like, no, in Detroit, this is how we talk about it. And this is how I'm going to talk about it on the House floor. I'm not going to talk about it like a human rights lawyer, United Nations lawyer, or like Mehdi. I'm going to talk about it from the girl. I'm going to talk about it like the girl from Southwest Detroit.
Congresswoman Bush, I'm not going to say this without any hyperbole. I think history will remember that you sacrificed your career for the biggest moral cause of our time. A very simple question. Why?
I ran, first of all, thank you all for that. I ran for this seat to be what I needed and what I wanted to see. And I ran for this seat saying that if it means my name, my reputation, and my money, I was going to do the work to save lives and do the work for those who have been most directly negatively impacted by policy violence. And I'll never forget being out there on the streets of Ferguson, again with our Palestinian brothers and sisters, putting themselves on the line for us because they didn't have to. Like, we were out there getting tear gassed, real bullets, rubber bullets, just all of dogs being unleashed. We were out there fighting day after day, night after night. Rain, sleet, hail, snow, hell no, we won't go. And they didn't have to be there. But not only that, they locked arms with our Jewish community. They locked arms with our AAPI community and so many others. Our Latinx community, and everybody locked arms, LGBT, everybody locked arms together. And I'll never forget this one night. There was this white woman, this white pastor, 4 feet something. Little. I'm 5'3", like I'm. But I'll never forget, there was this 16-year-old that was, he was FTP, you know what it would. Yes. And that's what he was saying. He just kept chanting it. And the police officer, we were at the police lineup, and he kept saying it. And this police officer got so mad just at the words. He didn't touch anyone. Montega's shaking his head, yes, because he remembers. Didn't touch him. And the police officer picked up his baton and was coming down to crack him over the head. And I'm standing there next to him, and I'm looking, and I'm like, it was dark outside, and there was this white woman she reached up in the air and she caught the baton in the air, and you could hear it go. She caught it and she just held it. And the police officer was looking like, what just happened? But then he backed down, he pulled it away, and he walked away. And I just remember in that moment thinking, this is who we have to be. When I thought about our Palestinian community members, but not only those that came over that delegation from Palestine, how they put themselves on the line, how our Hispanic and Latinx community, how they could have been deported and they still showed up for us. So that's why. It's because when they weren't the most impacted, they stood up for us. And so I'm not the most impacted, but my sister, I had to sit and listen to my sister when this happened and how she was being demonized and villainized and how her mother was not yet back in the United States. We were hoping she would get out. And I had to sit there and think about how can we burden her with trying to put together a ceasefire now resolution and make her be the one to stand up and fight for her own people when somebody else can help hold her back up. And so I said, because somebody else held my back up, I'm going to hold hers up if she wants. And she made the decision, sis, I need help. And so I said, I'll put myself on the line for you. I'll take the attacks first. You can stand next to me or behind me, but I will take the attacks first. And because my sister deserved that. And so that's why I put myself on the line. And let me say this, and I'm going to move, Mehdi. Someone said to me, well, why would you do that? You're a champion on reproductive freedom. You're a champion on unhoused rights. You're a champion on this, and that. And don't you know that's, you should still be in Congress doing that work. Well, let me say this. If we save one life in Gaza, if we save one family in Gaza, it was worth it. And I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't take it back. If I had the opportunity to do it again, I would still introduce that ceasefire now resolution and do the exact same thing.
Well said. Well said. And I think history will remember that a lot of people came late to the ceasefire movement. Ruwa Romman, let me ask you this. A lot of people in this room will remember a time when black people were not felt welcome in the Democratic Party. A lot of people in this room are still struggling to make black people feel even more welcome in the Democratic Party. But big picture, today we talk about black voters, the Black Coalition, South Carolina, Jim Clyburn. We talk about that when we talk about politics and race. Do you feel like you're in a position that maybe some black voters were in 20, 30, 40 years ago? I think of the Daily Show sketch after the DNC, which indirectly referred to what happened to you, where Jon Stewart said, there were black Americans and Jewish Americans and gay Americans, and there were no Palestinian Americans. I just wonder, as a Palestinian American lawmaker within the party, how does that make you feel when you see other groups have fought, struggled, almost got their seats at the table, but this one group constantly erased from the White House down?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I want to be very clear that I can't even begin to compare myself to black organizers because the reality is that they did have it so much worse, right? We always talk about the different forms of privileges and underprivileges and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And I think that's a very just important point to make. But the thing I loved, and I wasn't even supposed to be at the DNC, but the reason I trusted my colleagues within and I call them my colleagues now because we trauma bonded very well, but is that, within the uncommitted movement, there was a clear understanding of the history of Fannie Lou Hamer. And she was the person who literally integrated her party. And it wasn't to say that we had it as bad as she did. It was to literally give credit where credit is due, that she created the kinds of strategies and movements that we are learning from to do the same, to ensure that nobody forgets us either. Because the reality is that, again, we cannot do any of this alone. Even in Georgia, we cannot, it has one of the largest black populations, and yet we cannot flip the state by ourselves. It was a broad coalition. We changed the electorate, and the same thing is gonna have to happen within the Democratic Party, because the reality is, again, like Representative Tlaib said, it's not just Arabs and Muslims and Palestinians that care about this. It's all the people that have stood with us. It's all the people that have marched with us. It's all the students in the encampments. I mean, I've got students in my state right now, every faith and color you can think of, reaching out, asking what and how they can help. And they care. And they're saying, I don't know what to do come November because I saw what happened to you. And if they're not listening to you, what makes me think they're going to listen to me? And so the messages we're sending isn't just to my community. It's actually a lot more broad than that.
And one thing we've seen, of course, the place we've really seen organizing and people from different communities, Black, white, brown, Jewish, Muslim, Arab, come together is on college campuses. Since October, especially this year, we have a new school year. Congresswoman Tlaib, forgive me, I'm a journalist. I have to ask a news question to you. I'm looking at my Twitter, and the Michigan Attorney General has just announced that they are going to charge 11 people, mostly students and alumni, with criminal charges over protests against the war in Gaza. What is your reaction to Dana Nessel's news today in Michigan?
I mean, I think everybody saw my reaction. I mean, we have a Michigan Attorney General going beyond what the county prosecutor has done in evaluating, investigating, but also deciding, at this moment to use resources instead of getting justice, not one criminal charge in the Flint water crisis, but you're going to spend time vilifying and trying to use the power of your office to silence people's First Amendment right. Literally, we have protests and marches for Black Lives Matter, for immigrant rights, for climate, for reproductive health, nothing. But when it's for Palestine, all of a sudden, we have people saying, what Constitution? Well, she's gonna forget, she might have forgotten. Not only am I coming from the most beautiful Blackest city in the country, but also from a state that values the United States Constitution and the Michigan Constitution. And we're gonna fight this, and we're gonna protect these students who wanted to speak truth to power and wanted to save lives, no matter faith or ethnicity. If you look at that beautiful encampment and the number of people there, and we all visited, it was incredible to watch them sit not only in peace, but also just sitting there in presence of understanding and looking at the Armenian genocide, looking at the Black struggle, even currently in our country, and connecting it to what was going on in Gaza. And I can tell you at this moment, I'm just thinking, wow, our Michigan Democratic Attorney General, Dana Nessel, poof, out of the blue, let her people didn't even know she was gonna do it.
It's almost like Democrats don't want to win Michigan this year.
It's 50-something days left. It's funny, Mehdi heard me say it. It's like, don't they know she's only up 1 point? But not only that, it doesn't matter. But you know what comes down to, though? What is the right thing to do in election or non-election year? And so we got to, Pastor Bland Jr., and I don't know if you all know, when I go into a Baptist church, I told Cori this, I stick out. And so I go visit my churches because sometimes even worshiping with my residents keeps me close and rooted with them and grounded with them. But, I go visit the churches, what you do in Detroit. And I go and sit, and I don't know, when the pastor's really good, Mehdi, you feel like he's only talking to you. You know what I mean? When you go to a real good Baptist church, you feel like the pastor's only talking to you. And he looks right at me and he says, our country is not divided. We're just disconnected. And it has settled with me because it's easy for Cori and I to see connection. She's a nurse. She's got this amazing lived experience. I'm the eldest of 14, been taking care of people all my life. I probably better prepare me for public office than anything in my life. But when we start connecting our movements, that's when both Democratic and Republican parties should be scared.
Yep. One day, when we have more time, I'm going to ask you about how you remember 13 siblings' names, but that's a discussion for another day.
I'm all up. I'm like one of those.
Dr. Marc Lamont Hill is in the house. We are short on time. I'm going to throw you this question as the scholar on the stage. Let me ask you this. Put in context for us, if you can briefly, what it means to be someone who is active and organized and protesting and resisting on the Black Liberation Front and the Palestinian Liberation Front in American history. Because something I said recently, and I'd love for you to expand on this, is we've seen this before, right? None of this is new. It's students being demonized, the left being demonized, people being told you're anti the country. Like, this is what happened. Martin Luther King was not a popular guy when he was alive.
He was not.
So pick up from there if you can. Give us some context, because you're someone at the heart of all this.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And by the way, greetings, everybody. My deepest apologies. I was coming from New York and the train broke down. So I just, Amtrak be on that. So, but it's a wonderful question, and it's a wonderful question against the backdrop of the people on this panel. because everybody on this stage has paid a price. Everybody on this stage has taken a risk. Everyone has articulated an ethic of risk and then performed it in a way that mattered. It's easy to talk heavy when nothing is at stake. But when something's at stake, then you see what's really what people are about. And there's a long history of Black people standing in solidarity, not just with Palestine, but more fundamentally, Black people standing on the right side of history in an effort to produce justice. Black people have believed in justice. We have invested in justice. We have believed in America's democratic promises, even at the moments where they were the most unattainable, unimaginable, and implausible. You know, we still fought for a world that we would not even see. And there are moments where we did that by trying to imagine elsewhere. You know, Black Palestinian Solidarity has been going on for a long time, but there was a moment when you look at Black nationalist movements, to get to the scholarly part of it, think about Marcus Garvey's movement. Think about the UNIA. Think about other moments that said, we need a model of liberation. And at first, they looked to the Zionist movement. They looked, I mean, we got to be honest about that. We're talking about historical accuracy. They looked in the late 1900s to this burgeoning movement that was happening in Eastern Europe, going to what was then Ottoman Palestine, and they were saying, wait a minute, these are people who are identifying as a single nation. These are people who are looking for justice. These are people who are looking for their own land. They're looking for freedom, justice, and equality. Let me look there. But Black folk don't take us long to figure stuff out. Stuff start looking funny in the light. You know what I'm saying? We stepped out the club, the lights was on. We was like, wait a minute. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. I've been on the train for a while. I'm a little silly right now. So over time, what we began to recognize is that the liberation movement, which we recognize, the desire to be free from violence, the desire to be free from a state or a community or a world that hates you. Who has been more despised than African people? Right? We saw that and we recognized, but we also understood that having liberated yourself from oppression does not give you a license to then oppress others, right? And you can see that now. Look at how South Africa responds to Israel versus how Germany responds to Israel. We both have deep wounds. We both don't have the moral high ground. And when I say we, you talk about the United States, so ain't none of us got the moral high ground. But the question is, at this moment, what do we do? And so over time, Black freedom fighters began to recognize that while the struggle for liberation is righteous, you can't jump out of a burning building and land on the back of somebody else. So what do you then do? And so you began to see by the 50s, you began to see a turn for a couple of reasons. One, because of Black Muslims. The Black Muslim community has never been given the full credit or had the full debt paid. One, for creating, for opening up Islam in America, but also for creating a different vision of what the international community could look like. It wasn't about Black Palestinian solidarity, it was about internationalism. It was about a recognition that our liberation is bound up in the liberation of others around the globe, but not just as, hear me, don't just clap, hear me. This is not just about some leftist cliche. It's about understanding that the networks and the institutions of power are connected. Capitalism is connected. White supremacy is connected. We can't dismantle these systems because those systems don't have passports or Hawaii's or driver's licenses. They don't stop at the border. They go international. That's why we got to do that work and understand internationalism. So now we get to the 50s. I'm going to take this. I only got one answer, so I'm going to land this plane. We get to the 50s and some interesting stuff happens. One, Malcolm X. But we can't acknowledge Malcolm without acknowledging the nation. Because Malcolm, the movies want you to think Malcolm, bad Muslim, went to Mecca, saw white people, became good Muslim, right? Whole Disney movie. Malcolm was there in 59 before he was there in 64. He saw Gaza, he saw Jerusalem, he understood that. And he understood what it meant to say we are not just part of we're not minorities. When he said the original man is the Asiatic black man and make it the owner of the cream of the planet Earth, the father of civilization, the God of the universe. Supreme wisdom, lesson one, let's go. You understood that was an internationalist vision. So by the time you get to September, of 1964 in the Egyptian Gazette, when he's writing on Zionist logic, he's acknowledging that Zionism, before 67, he's acknowledging that Zionism is a problem, not because there's an issue with cultural Zionism, not because there's an issue with Jewishness, not because there's an issue with the cultural diaspora, but because this particular version of Zionism, political Zionism, is an ethno-national, settler-colonial, apartheid movement that is dependent upon the expulsion and the erasure and the dispossession of Palestinian people. And I ain't scared to say it. So the last thing, as I move to my conclusion, Rashida started talking about black churches, you know what I'm saying? You get to 67. Now things really, really change if you look at it from a political analysis perspective, because now you have the 1967 war. Now, there's not even an illusion. It's very clear that this is a neo-colonial movement. It's indisputable at this point, because now Golan is taken, now Sinai is taken, now Gaza is taken, now East Jerusalem is taken. So by the time you get to the summer of 67, you got black internationalists all the way back to Bandung. Go back and read Malcolm's message to the grassroots or listen to it. But I'll take you back to 67 again. SNCC is now standing up. They wrote a newsletter about what had just happened in the 6-day war, written, by the way, they say SNCC was written by Ethel Minor. We got to always write black women back into history as they get written out. It was Ethel Minor who wrote that newsletter. And so now you got a generation of children of Malcolm, the cultural nationalists, the Panthers, who were like, wait a minute, this thing is different. And what they try to do every Martin Luther King Day, as we move to the benediction, is they try to tell you King was a Zionist. King wasn't no Zionist. What King said is that he believed that Israel had a right to exist, but not the right to exist as an ethno-nationalist apartheid state. He was simply talking about respecting the territorial integrity after the 6-day war as vis-a-vis UN Resolution 242 and 338. He was making a purely juridical or legal argument. That's all he was doing. But by the end, what did King say? He said, I'm not going back to the Holy Land. I don't want my name signed to that thing. He said, I think that Israel has grown arrogant and unyielding. He said they took Jerusalem and I'm not sure they'll ever get it back. That was in 68. It is now 2024 and they still have not given back East Jerusalem. So when we look at this moment with these people in this room, we are not alone. And when we walked through Ferguson, and then we walked to Jerusalem, and we walked to Jericho, and we walked to Gaza, when we walk from these places from Ferguson to Palestine, we are standing on the shoulders of generations of liberators and freedom fighters who dreamt more ambitious and audacious freedom dreams than we could have ever imagined. And so at this juncture in history, we no longer need to be afraid. There are too many of us to be afraid. We no longer need to lie. We ain't got to tell people that the president's working night and day to get a ceasefire, but we gonna still keep sending money and weapons and giving UN Security Council protection. Stop it. Tell the truth. Stand up for freedom. Stand on business like Dr. King or somebody said. And then do the work of liberation. Because until Palestine is free, until Sudan is free, until Congo is free, until Haiti is free, then not one single one of us in this room is free. Free Palestine from the river to the motherfucking sea.
And Amtrak thought they could stop this guy. Thank you for that. He said he was only going to get one answer. I think he had 7 more than everyone else, but I think it was worth it. I think it was worth it. Thank you, Mark. We're going to throw it open to the audience. By the way, just to be clear, you said everyone, I just want to be, for the record, you said everyone on the stage has paid a price. For the record, I have no idea what you're referring to in relation to me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Every time Mehdi loses a job, I get a job. So I'll be checking the news. I'm like, Al Jazeera, take it.
Let's open up to the crowd. I'm going to take 3 questions in one go because we're short on time. I'm going to take it from all 3 blocks of the audience. And gentleman standing up, he's good to go. So we're going to go to him first. Oh, he sat down again. There's a mic right behind you. Right behind you. I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Corey. I was wondering, watching the ongoing war in Gaza, largely because of the current round of founding was started, obviously because of what happened on October 7th. One thing I noticed that there was no commentary about October 7th, no commentary about Hamas. Could you explain why? And also, do you believe that Hamas should surrender in exchange for stopping the ongoing violence, which I agree has been extremely tragic and killed far too many innocent Palestinians?
Okay, that's the first one. Let's take one from that side of the room. Anyone? Oh, is this gentleman standing here? Okay.
While
Right
we're
here,
figuring
right here.
that out, let me say, while we're figuring that out, I want to acknowledge Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is in the room.
Someone else who's never paid any prices whatsoever
one.
for the position she's taken. Gentlemen.
My question is, how do we move beyond a transactional approach to build inter-community solidarity between Black people and Palestinians?
Okay, and then let's take one from this side of the hall. Okay, lady here. The microphone's right there.
I just want to say I thank you guys for bringing this to the forefront. I am an individual. I came from the islands. I went to high school in Israel, and it breaks my heart to see what is happening. I've been to Gaza. My dad worked for the UN for many years, and it breaks my heart that I've adopted this country as my home, but I also know how to be human first, and what is happening is atrocious. And if you take Palestinian out and you put Black in there, it's the same thing. It's unfair. And the last thing is, for something this important, why did we put it in such a small room? I had to listen to this from outside the door.
Yes.
Through the crack in the window. What?
Good
Did they
question.
think that it doesn't matter to us as Black people? No.
I don't know why you're looking at me when you're asking the question. I'm just a moderated
But anyway,
Congresswoman in the middle over
From
there.
the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to take one more question from the lady here in the red jacket.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby. I'm a council member in the city of Detroit. We passed the ceasefire resolution there. I am very much a lefty, and people constantly ask me to help support Harris for the presidential campaign when I'm seeing my friends in Dearborn and Detroit praying for her to lose. My question is, how do we collectively survive this election? It's a very real question. I don't know what to do. I don't know when to help her or how. What does this look like? How do we get this done?
I
Thank you.
spent 9 months going around the United States speaking at audiences everywhere, and that question comes up everywhere when I was waiting for it to come up tonight, and it's come up tonight. All right, or today. Okay, let's just go from the top. I felt like your question was for Mark, so I'm going to throw it to Mark. Why won't
Hamas question.
Why won't Hamas surrender? Do you call for Hamas to surrender? Why didn't you talk about Hamas in your wonderful remarks?
All right, I'll be literally 1 minute. Okay, I didn't mention Hamas in my remarks because the question was about Black Palestinian solidarity throughout history, and Hamas is not that old. 1987, right? So that's why. I feel like we have this reflexive tick in American media and politics where we have to say, but Hamas, what about Hamas? What are we going to do about Hamas? Denounce Hamas, right? And I think that it's unnecessary and it's excessive. That does not mean that we don't have critiques of Hamas. But let's be very clear. Hamas hasn't surrendered because they're still under brutal occupation. Hamas hasn't surrendered because Israel has never given the Palestinian people 1 minute, 1 second self-determination, freedom, or liberation. Even after they left ostensibly in Gaza in 2005, 2006, they simply occupied it by bordering land, air, sea, electromagnetic sphere, everything, right? I mean, literally, right? I mean, Palestinians they don't control what goes in, what goes out, etc. And so when you talk about Hamas, or you talk about October 7th, we also have to talk about October 6th. Because history didn't start on October 7th, right? And so my moral code is that you don't kidnap innocent people and that you don't kill civilians, all right? That's fine. We can have that conversation. I'm not without a critique of Hamas, but as a non-Palestinian, which is why I was a little reluctant to answer the question, it is not my job to tell people how to liberate themselves. It is not my job to tell people how to get free And the question presumes, and it's undergirded by a kind of Orientalist, white supremacist idea that Palestinians are these unyielding, barbaric, uncivilized, pre-modern people who are incapable of negotiation. When Palestinians stand up and walk straight and march, they shoot them down. Look at the March of Return. When you have a general strike like the Great Revolts from 1936 to 1939, the revolts from 36 to 39, the strike was from October of 36 to April of 36, October of 36, they still killed them, right? When Palestinians negotiate, they take the land. When Palestinians, it's just like black folk. You pull your pants up, they shoot you. You put on the tie, they shoot you, right?
Mark, it's 1:52 and I feel you're building, and I got to.
No, I'm not building. I'm done. Not building.
I love it, but
so the point is, you can. There is room in a political discourse to have a critique of Hamas.
Yep.
But they are a democratically elected organization that has been systematically undermined. So if we're going to have the conversation about Hamas, don't just talk about them like they're some irrational, crazy people against the backdrop of Israeli settler states that sexually abuse people, that steal land, that kill people, that never hold on to a treaty. So let's have a real conversation. If we're gonna talk about Hamas, let's have a real conversation about Hamas, not the neoliberal, dishonest Orientalist conversation about Hamas.
I would point out, Mark, 2005, not elected, not really. I mean, I wouldn't fall down that. I would just.
You wouldn't call Hamas's election democratic?
05, man. It's
That's what I'm talking about.
19 years ago. I mean,
they don't have a mandate.
yeah.
I agree with
you.
you.
The Israelis try and excuse killing them because they're like, you voted for Hamas, and I always get frustrated.
And that's why. Fair enough. They're not. Yeah. They were. I'm just saying they weren't a terrorist organization that just popped up and took over the town.
Agreed. Okay. And gentleman's got his video. We'll see where that goes.
It ain't gonna look like that on the internet tomorrow. I already know.
We have.
They can't fire me for nothing else.
We have the question for the gentleman. Yes, Ruwa, do you want to take the question about intercommunity relationships? We'll keep it short because we're running out of time.
Really love that question.
Under 60 seconds.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna put it to you this way. I think it looks like us showing up for each other and not in a tit for tat way, but in a, I have the ability to do something for you right now and I'm gonna do it without expectation. However, with the understanding from the receiving party that they will show up for you as well, just like Congresswoman Bush showed up for us when we couldn't even show up for ourselves. To me, that's what it looks like, but it also looks like when those Palestinians reached out to those people in Ferguson and said, let me help you deal with the tear gas. To me, but it involves sacrifice. You can't just be like, I'm gonna show up when it's nice or the headlines are there or when it's convenient. And to me, that's it's reciprocity more than it is about for tat.
So we're going.
I promise.
I'm gonna bring you in. Congresswoman Bush is about to do concluding remarks. We're gonna take that last one wasn't really a question about why was the room not big enough, but it was a very powerful moment about humanity. Congresswoman, I want you to take that, if you want to pick up on that question.
I'm going to pick up on that
question. I also
question.
need you to do with what are you going to do in November?
I got Gabby.
That's for you. That was made for you.
So one of the things that I think is important, in 2016, I was at a Flint masjid, and I do it through story, I'm sorry, really quick. I was at a Flint masjid, and I remember it was so crazy. I was on a panel, and there's Congressman Kildee and everything, but the question came to me. I was just finished my 6 years in the State House, and the question was from a young Muslima. Maybe she was 16, 17 years old. She gets up and she goes, Rashida, how come nobody's saying anything about him wanting to do a Muslim ban? Nobody's saying anything. This is before the Muslim ban got put into effect and everybody showed up to the airport. And I looked at her and I said, sister, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to everybody in this masjid. How many of you said anything when he said Mexicans were rapists? You gotta sometimes, as your own self, this is how you do it and how I do it. And again, I know I grew up differently than many other Muslims and Palestinians. I get it. I grew up in Detroit. But I was like, I put the mirror up like, but where were you? So you can't, that's how you push back and not make it transactional, is constantly putting the mirror up. In regards to this, I get this question all the time, Rashida, what are we going to do? Look, I grew up in a family, we always voted. Democrat, my dad put signs up in front of Democrats I couldn't even vote for. It's not even in our district, Baba. It doesn't matter. That's what happens when you grow up in a UAW home. It's like Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. My dad was the type, he said, you see this? You see the shirt on you? That's from, he's like, that's the Democrats. Okay, Dad. You think you got the shoes? You better, Democrats. And this is me now, as I got older, Gabby, I was like, nah, Yaba, that was from UAW. That was not from just Democratic Party. That was from your union got you that. When people say to me, oh, you're 1 of 14, you got straight teeth. How'd you get straight teeth? UAW. I got straight teeth because the UAW got his dental coverage. I need to make that clear, Mehdi. But with this, no. But this question comes up a lot. But it's like, Why is it on us and not on the party? Why is it on us and not the party? I mean, no, this is real.
All right,
The majority of Americans want us to end the support of the genocide. You do something about it. But I also tell people, and this is, Gabby, what I tell people in Dearborn, because I'm the Congresswoman in Dearborn. I also, be honest, I tell them, look, I don't want us to be more invisible, so I need you to vote. But remember, that ballot is not an application. It doesn't need to be complete. But that's the thing. That's the choice.
So just to be clear,
but
you're saying don't vote for the top of the
No,
ticket.
I am saying to people, vote. But you also have a choice. If you think, well, because a lot of them tell me, Mehdi, I don't want blood on my hands, Rashida.
And I get it, same thing.
That's what they tell me in Arabic.
Do
I
you
don't want
say?
blood on my
I'm just
hands.
wondering what you
I
say.
tell them, okay, but there's other people on this ballot that
Agreed.
support ceasefire. There's other people in this ballot that can protect our community. We have a Michigan Supreme Court justice race right now. We got to do something about it. But again, I always ask consistently, the Harris campaign and everybody, you hear us loud and clear. Don't risk it. Don't risk it. Why are we more afraid of Trump becoming president more than our own party? That's majority of us are saying, we got your back, Harris. We got you. Do what's right.
Before I hand over to Congresswoman Bush, just to check, have you endorsed Kamala Harris? Yeah, I don't know. I'm asking genuinely. It's just a question.
Hey, hold on. I offered it and it was rejected.
Yes.
So like, I don't even know if they want it. I mean, but real talk. Do they
what
want?
A great, what a great
Actually,
reply.
Hold on.
What a great
No,
reply.
hold on.
What a great
like
reply.
This, I'm
Well
sorry.
said.
Okay, this is like firing
Well
me
said.
up. This is not good. I was getting myself, but like real talk. Real talk. Do they want that? Like that's the question I've been asking. Do you want it, or are you planning on a different path to the White House? In which case, that's fine.
Normally, I hate it when people answer a question of mine with a question, but that is a great question.
I don't know.
And now I'm going to get in trouble because we're not going to make 2 o'clock. So I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to hand back to Congresswoman Bush to give us concluding remarks to answer the question of the night as to why we didn't get a bigger room. And I am going to say, I'm going to just say, to echo what Mark said, I mean, we know where that line came from. It is the line that defines all of us here, the late, great Nelson Mandela, that we all know that none of us will be free until Palestine will be free. Congresswoman Bush, over to you.
Let me first start by saying thank you to the panel. Thank you, each and every one of you, for taking your time out to be here, for bringing such insight and such fire and such love and support and solidarity, because we want this to be the beginning. I think this is the first of its kind discussion during CBC week. So hopefully, even though I won't be here, somebody else will continue this on, because if you send me back, if you send me back, let me say this, because AIPAC and what they did to me is real. And if we think that AIPAC was only targeting Jamal and Cori, actually they're targeting so many of us. So pay attention to what's going to happen in the next 2 years. So whether I come back or whether I come back in 2 years or 4 years or whatever it is, if I come back, I'm gonna need your help. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. Okay, so that's right. So let me say to you all, thank you all for caring about this issue enough to show up. Thank you for wanting to learn. Thank you for wanting to give information. You all, we need you in this movement. This movement is all of us. This movement can't just be about me and what I know and my own journey and my experiences. It has to be what Dr. King talked about, the World House. Of course, it wasn't his intellectual property, but he spoke about it. And he in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? I believe that was the one. And the World House, so not just me and mine, but about how it affects the entire world. So we have a part in that. And the thing is this, I'm saying it in this particular space because I recognize, and I said this yesterday, in this particular space, everybody in here has a title, or you're part of something, some movement or some organization. Everybody in here is fly, and I get that. So that means that everybody in here has a purpose, and you have a reason why you were sent here or compelled to be here. So now you got to do something with that information. You got to do something with it. Everybody in here has been tasked with that. So I just hope you know that. So understand that mandate when you walk out the door, that now you got to do something more and different than what you did before you came in. Okay, now let me also say this. When we want to know about this room. Okay, let me tell, wait a minute. I am. Where's Lanice Wallace? Come up here. Woo! You all, Lanice Wallace, this is my chief of staff. So let me say this. First of all, we barely have a room. barely have a room. We almost didn't have a room. This was almost canceled. So we had a different room, and we were told just wasn't going to be. But because I have a chief of staff who brings the fire herself, and a chief of staff who understood how important this moment was and this panel would be, she didn't just allow it to be. And so did we get a big enough room? No. But instead of this being shut down and not happening at all, we ended up with this room. So if we got to be a little tight, y'all, we movement, folks. We sleep on the floor. If we need to, we'll pile up. We sleep outside. We know how to protest, whether regardless. So you know what? This was still comfortable for us. So thank you for the question. But the fact that we are even still in here when we were supposed to be shut out, but you know they can't shut out. They can't shut us out. They can't shut. Y'all know Cori Bush don't take no. So anyway, thank you all so much. Free, free Palestine. And we're going to continue to stand up and speak for all people. Humanity is in our hearts, but it's also on our backs. So thank you all so much.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.